Oh, turn it up.
Here we go. Up here with your crew in an awesome view. Everything you love stacked right in front of you. Got your icon pass, powder slash it. 50 plus destinations.
Speaking of, did you get your Icon Pass yet, Sean?
I'm on iconpass.com dropping in right now. Wow, from just $259 adult, everyone knows you get the best price in the spring.
Yeah, that's the good stuff.
Okay, done.
So pass the good stuff, yeah, it's the good stuff.
And now a special motorcycle weather report from Progressive.
And today expect mostly sunny conditions with a high on life that can only come from cruising down the road on two wheels. Kids will wave, dogs will bark, and cyclists in padded shorts will instantly regret their chosen mode of transportation. Whereas you, on the other hand, will look super duper cool. Back to you in the studio.
This has been a special motorcycle weather report from Progressive, where every day's a beautiful day to ride with coverage from America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Get a quote today and see what you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, where we learn how to develop a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. From the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. Here's our host, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, stewardship coach, and my husband, the man they call Mr. Fortified, Jason Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Fortified Life podcast. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. And here on the Fortified Life podcast, we are all about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited about this episode today because this particular guest is somebody that my wife and I have followed her journey for a long time. We'll get into that with her. So this is really special for me, and I know for sure God moves in her life. That's evident by everything that's happened with her very recently over the last year and a half. But before I bring her on, let me introduce her to you. Christy Wright is the #1 bestselling author of Business Boutique, Take Back Your Time, and Living True. She is a certified business coach and speaking coach, and she loves to help people push past their fear to do things scared. Christy is the host of the new podcast, Get Your Hopes Up, where she encourages people to get to know God, get closer to Him, and get their hopes up again. Christy has been featured on the Today Show and Fox News, and in Success, Entrepreneur, and Women's Day magazines. Whether she's running around on stage or running after her kids, Christy makes the most out of life and loves to help others do the same. Christy lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her husband, Matt, and their 3 children, Carter, Conley, and Mary Grace. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, Christy Wright.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Absolutely, Christy. It's awesome to have you on the show. Christy, we read all of that in your bio, and God has graced you to do a lot of things. But we know specifically over the last year and a half, God has really had you step out into something new. So just chronicle some of that journey for us, what's happened over the last year or two.
Yeah, it's a wild story for sure. You know, it's funny. I'm in a small group of women that are going through Discerning the Voice of God by Priscilla Shirer, the study. I did the study years ago. I couldn't remember when, and have read the book. I just love that study. And so I pulled my old book out and I was going through it in May of 2021. And I was writing all about, her first chapter is all about obedience. And it's like, you've just got to obey. And I got notes, Jason. You just got to obey. Just like Abraham, God called him to leave everything. You got to obey. I had no idea. And in just a few months, I would be asked to obey, similar to Abraham, to leave everything. And so after a really incredible 12th year at Ramsey, no intention to leave or go anywhere. I had a great platform there that they helped me build, and business boutique brand and Christy Wright show and coaching and books and all the things. And I was there for life. I planned to be there for life. God had called me there years ago, so I knew I was supposed to be there. And I'd had a really good year in 2021 and felt like I hit a gear. I was such a veteran on the team. I had been around the longest and helped a lot of the new speakers coming in. And I just felt really secure in my spot there. And And in November, almost out of thin air, basically, God called me to leave. And if you would have told me months before God's going to call you to leave, I would have laughed, because I'm like, no. God wouldn't do that. God's not going to do that. And so it was very shocking. It was very terrifying. I will say it was confusing at first, because you're like, God, why would you do this? Like, why would you do this? But it wasn't confusing in the sense of I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. I've told my girlfriends joking around, I'm like, no, when you look at the affirmations I had, like, I had to leave. God was going to strike me with lightning if I didn't leave. Like, it was so clear that's what I had to do. And I'm so grateful that God, in his mercy, I was telling my girlfriends the other day in that group, I said, I think sometimes, I don't know this for sure, I don't think it's a formula, but I think often the harder the call, the more he walks to you, the more he shows his closeness, gives his affirmations, because he knows it's a really hard call. So he gave me so many affirmations. And after a few months of walking that out, I left, I came home, I rested. God told me I was supposed to rest for 3 months. I was supposed to do nothing for 3 months. He was very clear that I was not supposed to just go do some stuff and not panic to make money or be scared about bills and all the things. And so I just rested and I stayed home, and was still in seminary classes at the time, and still had help at the house at the time. We had a nanny for 5 years. And so it was just life as normal, other than that, walked away from my job. I tried to keep everything else steady, to really process that and grieve that, that was a grieving process. I was sad. And then one day in February, I woke up and I had this idea to train speakers. And it was one of those things where at first I was kind of like, is this my idea or God's idea? Am I just trying to go do something again? Like, I'm a entrepreneurial. But the idea just kept growing and growing, so much so that night I told my husband, hey, I feel free to go build this. I think I'm supposed to do this. And it just starts clicking, Jason. Like, I start to see, like, oh, this has always been in me. Oh, I've been helping people in green rooms for years. Oh, I've been writing talks for other personalities behind the scenes that no one knew about, because I love to craft messages. And I love to help people get the story in their head and their heart out in a compelling way through story and through a basic story arc, and calling your audience to action and how to deliver it. And I'm good at that. Like, I can say that I'm gifted at that. And I've learned from the best of the best. I have had a front row seat with peers and mentors that are some of the most brilliant minds and speakers in the country. And so I have learned from the best for 12 years. So it just starts making sense that I'm supposed to do this. I mean, it just starts like clicking, like, this is the thing. And then I start getting all those affirmations, one day after another. It's like in my face. One day, in fact, I was doing a post for my seminary class. It was Old Testament, and it was on Jeremiah. And so I go to Jeremiah in the Bible to start to like kind of pull some verses for my homework. And my eyes go to Jeremiah 1:6. And it's where God calls Jeremiah to be a prophet. And Jeremiah responds, alas, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. And the words jumped off the page at me. You know that feeling, where you read something and the Holy Spirit is like, this is for you. It was like a neon, And the Lord spoke to me and he said, Christy, there are a lot of people that I'm going to use that don't know how to speak. You're going to teach them. And chills went up my arm, and I was like, this is the thing. I knew when I left, God was going to give me the thing. I knew I'm still called to speak and preach and write. Like, those are the things I've been doing that I'll continue to do. But I knew there was something he hadn't told me yet when I left. And I even said that on the last episode of the Christy Wright Show. And so I thought, this is the thing. So I go back to the calendar and I'm like, what was that random Thursday where I wake up and the moment I'm conscious, I have this idea to train speakers? And it was February 24th. And I go back on the calendar 3 months, because God told me 3 months. And I knew it was going to be 3 months to the day. For some reason, he just said 3 months. But I didn't know when that started. And I didn't know when it ended, right? It's a long process of walking this whole thing out. So I go back to the calendar. And 3 months from February 24th, the day that I had the idea to train speakers, was November 24th. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving when I sent an email to Dave Ramsey's assistant letting her know I needed to meet with him, which I don't do. That was the day I obeyed and took action on the call to leave, where there was no turning back. It was the first domino that knocked over all the dominoes. It was the day I obeyed. And 3 months to the day, God dropped in my spirit the idea of what I'm supposed to do next. So my conviction and passion and confidence and authority in this new space of speaker training, I'm like, this is what God's asked me to do. So I know I'm in his lane. And what's really cool, Jason, and I think we all do this, a lot of times we're so heads down in our own life of like, God, what do you want me to do? And how are you going to make a way for me? And how are you going to help me pay my bills? So as God gives me this idea, my first thought, in full honesty, right? Me being blunt, my first thought is, oh, how kind of God to make a way for me. How kind of God to carve out a path for me to create an income for my family that honors Ramsey, right? Like that was a narrow lane, and God carved it out. How good of God to take care of me. And then in August, when I start putting out my course, Stop Winging It Speaker Training, and my coaching and my resources like a free mini book, when I start putting this stuff out there, everyone is going, this is an answer to my prayer.
Wow.
Because God's been calling me to speak, and I keep telling God, I don't know how. And so you saying, hey, I'm training speakers is an answer to my call. And isn't it like God to always work us all together, to always have multiple purposes that weave together for his good and his work in the kingdom? And so it's just, so now that's what I'm doing. I've got a new podcast called Get Your Hopes Up. And I'm still encouraging people towards Jesus, which I'll always do no matter what I do. But in this season of transition, like professionally, I'm not doing as much business coaching like I did in the past. I'm really helping people get their messages out, whether that's a podcaster or YouTuber or speaker or pastor or politician or someone that just has a call to use their voice to tell their story. I want to help people get the message in their head and their heart out. And so it's been really fun to do that. And I think we're just getting started, which is really cool.
Wow, Christy, that is exciting, exhilarating, and it's just evident what God is doing in your life. When especially, Christy, what came to mind, you had been there 12 years and then God tells you to rest for 3 months. And I'm just, the imagery is just hitting me from scripture. Like, wow, really 12 and 3, Lord? That sounds about right.
I mean, those numbers are biblical numbers. Someone sent me a message on Instagram after I posted that I've been there 12 years. They said 12 is a biblical number. Like it's this number of completion. 12 is something. And then 3, we know the 3 months the Israelites wandered in the desert until they get to Mount Sinai at 3 months to the day when they got the law of Moses. And I'm just like, you just see all, yes. I mean, I got chills even as I think about like God is like to the day. He's so in the details of timing of things, you know?
Yeah. Christy, what I love about your story is we're talking about what you're doing professionally, but what's interwoven in between that is you listening to God and talking to God. So, Christy, can you talk about the importance from a faith standpoint? Like, you couldn't have decided what direction to go in without going to God. And sometimes in the marketplace, Christy, there's this tendency to compartmentalize things, maybe because of the industry that we're in, or maybe because, we're a little bit, afraid to kind of let people know what your beliefs are. So can you just talk about that for, a faith-based business owner or someone in the corporate space that is a believer, just the importance of seeking God, not just for our family and spouses, but also concerning our role in the marketplace?
Yeah. I like to dig into sometimes why we do what we do. And I get that because you're exactly right. People do that. And so then I just think like, okay, why? Like, why do we compartmentalize? Why do we think that God is not concerned with the affairs of our business or our career or our promotion or our bills or our mortgage or what? Like, why do we think that? I'm like, okay, on the one hand, we think that maybe God's too busy. Like he's just too concerned with healing cancer. He doesn't actually care about the tactical, practical affairs of our life, which we know is not true. I love the quote by, I think it was Elizabeth Elliot that said, if you believe in a God that controls the big things, you must believe in a God that controls the small things. It is we, of course, to whom things seem big or small. And if anybody listening right now has never experienced God interfere in a holy, supernatural, incredible way with the practical affairs of your life, challenge him. Ask him to show up in that meeting that's coming up today. Ask him to show up for that house you're going to put an offer on. Ask him to show up for something so tactical, a bill that needs to be paid. And then when he does, you will learn something about his character and it will bolster your faith, and you will learn to go back to him for the practical needs of your life, because believe it or not, he actually does care about the practical needs of our life, of our lives. The second thing that I think that keeps us from keeping God out of things is we think arrogantly we can do it better. Right. We're like, okay, God, I know you're God and all, but I don't know if you know, but I'm really good at solving problems, or I know my industry. Like you see this since the beginning of time. You look at the Bible and you just go like, the pattern in the Bible is just how arrogant people were, like how they thought they could do it better. They could do it without God, that they knew something God didn't know. They had some problem God couldn't solve. The Israelites whine and complain over and over and over again. And then we look at them and go, y'all are idiots. He was faithful to you 100 million times and you're doubting him on the next day. And then I go, oh man, that's me, right? Isn't that me? It's like he's faithful my whole life. And they're like, oh God, I don't know. What about this year? And so I think that if we can just root ourselves back in the truths of God, and that's the truth we learn from Scripture, the truth we look from our history of his faithfulness, we can go, okay, he's God and I'm not. And he knows everything and he can do anything. We either believe that or we don't.
Yeah.
We might stitch it on a pillow and then in real life, we don't go to him for anything. I just right before we hopped on to record this, I recorded a reel on my phone and saved it as a draft to finish editing after our conversation. But I said, you know, it's January, end of January at the time of this recording, and you've already given up on your goal. And it's not because it's not a good goal. It's not because you're not hardworking. It's not because you're lazy or unmotivated. It's because you don't see how it's possible. And the reality is, with God, anything is possible. How did God respond to Sarah when she laughed at the promise because she doubted him? He said, is anything too hard for the Lord?
Right.
And so I just encourage people to go, no, remind yourself of who God is as you see his attention to detail and his involvement with the affairs of the world through history in the Bible, and consider that he might be able to be that involved with you and challenge him. And I don't mean like test him in like an arrogant way. I mean like go to him and go, God, I've got you in a box. And in this box, you don't help with these things. So I want you to bust out of this box I've put you in my mind. And I want you to help me with this parent-teacher meeting with my child, or this goal that I have, or this bill that I need to pay. Like, will you show me how you care about those things? Because I'll tell you, let me tell you one story as an example, okay? One story. Because sometimes for me, Jason, what I do is I have to get to a dead end before I go to God. That's just true. That's still real time. I'm so hard-headed. I'm going to do it myself. I think I'm really smart at solving problems, and I just like it's a last resort, even though we know it shouldn't be, blah, blah, blah. So this was years ago, okay, at Ramsey. This is our old Ramsey story. Years ago, when I was very first getting started, we knew that I was going to help women start businesses. That was the story of my mom. I was a business coach, yada, yada, yada. And so I started doing research on women in business, and we're trying to figure out what to name this brand around business, women-owned businesses. But they're like, we've got to figure out to come up with a name and a tagline, logo, and all that kind of stuff. And so Dave had kept calling it, because I did research and I was starting to understand the psychology of these women. And Dave kept calling it boutique business. It's like a little boutique business. It's like a, small business boutique business. But I was like, we can't call it that, because people are going to think it's for businesses that are boutiques only, that sell clothes and candles and gifts, right? Like I was like, this is much more than just a boutique. Who's going to tell him that it can't be that? But I didn't have a better idea. So I was like, I'm not going to tell him it's not that until I have a better idea. And I didn't have a better idea. So we did research, and we asked a question in the survey that 13,000 women took, and it said, what phrase do you identify with most? Small business, side business, home-based business, hobby business, micro business, mompreneur. Micro business and mompreneur didn't rate at all. The other four, small, side, home, and hobby, were all exactly equal. But here's what's interesting. They were not interchangeable. So the woman that ran a small business, she was like, this is not like a hobby. This is not a side business. She was offended by the other titles. A woman that ran a hobby business was like, I mean, this is not a small business. This is just this little thing. Like, it's just it. But I'm like, I know this is for all of you. Right. So how do I talk about this thing in a way that is for all of you, when all of you are having this identity crisis? You all think you're different, and you don't identify with these other terms. And Dave just kept calling it boutique business. And so I'm at the dead end. And so I get to that dead end, and I do what I do when I get to dead ends, and I pray. And I'm sitting in my bed. I'm like, Lord, we need a name for this thing. Dave Ramsey thinks it's going to be boutique business. It cannot be that. I think they've already bought the URL. I know it cannot be that, because we're going to isolate everyone that's not a boutique. I need a name. And God said, flip it. It's the business boutique. You're not describing them. You're describing you. You are the place that people come for all things business. God gave me the name. So if you don't think God cares about the details of your business or your finances or your ideas or your project or your new hire, he does. Would you just ask him? Because his ideas are so much better than our ideas. And as scripture says, his ways are above our ways. His thoughts are above our thoughts. So if you want to tap into supernatural power and ideas that are better than anything your teeny brain can come up with, pray about those things and watch how God shows up, because he will. He absolutely will.
I love that story, Christine. I can definitely identify on a lot of that, whether it's naming conventions or ideas, or I call them Holy Spirit downloads in the moment, just supernatural insight. And that's very real day to day if we would just trust him and spend time with him. It's amazing. It's funny. As we were talking about us leaving, Ramsey, one of the right before I left in like beginning of November of 21, I had an all-day planning meeting with my team to plan out like the next 2 years, because for the first time in my life, everything I'd ever done had wrapped up and we had a clean slate. I just kept saying, I got a clean slate. I got a clean slate next year, because that never happens. Everything had a perfect bow on it. And it was time to plan the next 2 years, because we always plan way out. And I go to this meeting, and we're just not coming up with any ideas. Like, the ideas are going on the board, but they're not good, and they don't feel powerful. They don't feel right. And I just stopped the team. I'm like, guys, we need to pray. These are not the right ideas. And so we pray, and we just keep coming up with ideas, but none of the right ideas. And I'll leave there, and I'm like, we got to have another meeting, because God didn't give us the ideas. He didn't give us the ideas of what we're supposed to do in the next 2 years. And maybe we didn't have the right people in the room, but we didn't get it. You know when you got it, and you know when you don't, and we didn't get it. And then when God spoke to me a couple weeks later, as he's calling me to leave, he said, it was 3 a.m, and he's speaking to me, and he said, Christy, I did not give you vision there because your purpose is not there anymore. He didn't give me vision in the meeting. So even the absence of his vision was him directing me. Yeah, isn't that wild? That is wild. My goodness. I love that. Christy, as you've stepped out into what God has called you to do concerning helping people speak, and I love that passage from Jeremiah. When you're working with people, Christy, and I know you're a big fan of, hey, do it scared and let's move. You hear faith over fear a lot. But then there's some practical things, Christy. Yeah. What have you noticed, like, oh my gosh, I'm speaking, I'm a speaker, what do? I have a presentation. Like, as people step into that, what is some of the advice and wisdom that you give as people go into a presentation where their mind is blank? And I'm sure you probably had people in coaching sessions, Christy, help me. They want me to speak and I have no idea where the heck to get started.
Yeah, I love that. So I'll give you two parts to it. The first part is this. Often when people think about speaking or presenting, they start with themselves. What do I want to say? And you're not going to win if you start with what you want to say. It's okay if that's a factor, because you need to speak from expertise in your story and your experience. That obviously needs to be considered, but that is not what drives the talk. What drives the talk is, what does the audience need to hear? And that's going to make all the difference in the world, where you begin to connect with them on pain points that they have and problems that they have that you're going to solve through your talk, because then everything you say is for their benefit. And let's just have a quick timeout here, Jason. So many speakers get on stage, get behind microphones, and all they think about is, what do I want to say? And what do I want to share? And it never connects with the audience, and it doesn't make the impact because they're thinking about themselves. And the thing that I remind people of is, so this is basic psychology. I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but the way that our brain is wired for survival, all day, every day, we are filtering information through one simple question. What's in it for me? Why do I care? Think about scrolling social media. You, Jason, when you scroll social media, when I scroll social media, what do you stop on? You stop on things that do something for you. Exactly. You stop on things that interest you, that entertain you, that educate you. They do something for you. If there's something that does nothing for you, you scroll past it because your brain goes, this doesn't apply to us, right? Your audience is doing the same thing. If you're not connecting what you care about to what they care about, your solutions to their problems, if you don't spend time to do that, their brain has checked you out. Yeah. They may be looking at you, but they're thinking about their to-do list. They may not even be looking at you. They may be looking at their phone or falling asleep. It's the reason your audience is not engaged is because you're not crafting a talk where every word out of your mouth is for their benefit. It's an answer to the question their brain is thinking from a survival mindset. Why do I care? Every word out of your mouth answers it. Even the stories you tell, even the personal stories you tell, do something for them. It entertains them to keep them engaged, to drop that truth right after the story. And so there's purpose and intentionality in everything that we say and deliver. And the purpose and an intentionality is for the benefit of the audience. It is what they need to hear. If there's anything that you want to say that they don't need to hear, it needs to get cut, because you're not there for you. You're there for them. You're not there for standing ovations. You're not there for applause. You're not there for good reviews. You're there for life change and transformation for them. And so everything you craft and do is for them. And the second thing that I would say, and this is really tactical, but I have, after doing this for a long time, but doing it intentionally as a business this last 6 months, it is something people genuinely need help with, Jason. Like, we don't know how to do this. Most people don't know how to do this. More people now than ever before have microphones, platforms, social media, YouTube channels. They're getting asked to speak, to be guests on podcasts, to be on stages, to lead Bible studies, to lead their business, to speak in front of a team. More people than ever.
It's true.
And none of them were trained.
Right.
Maybe you took an 8th grade speech class that told you the 3-point structure. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That's not what we do. That's not what we do. It's not more complicated than that in terms of difficulty, but it's more engaging than that. It's more personal and empathetic and entertaining. It's a story arc where you take people on a journey where they're on the edge of their seat because you unpack the problem that they have that makes them care about your solution. Then you give them that solution about what is possible about the future. Then you lead them to the action of what they're going to do about it to apply it to their life so that something actually moves and shifts and changes in their life because of your time in front of a mic. And so the structure that I give people is not more complicated than a 3-point structure, but it is more in tune with how our brains work from understanding story and being engaged and being interested. And I think people need to know that if you think you need help speaking or presenting or just talking in front of people, it doesn't mean you're a bad speaker. It just means you were never trained in this, which, by the way, no one was. You're in good company. We all need help.
I love that, Christy, and you're right. Just there's more people than ever with platforms, and dare I say, Christy, it can come across very quickly.
People message me all the time, Jason. They're like, "Can I sponsor my pastor to go through your course?" But here's the thing: the worst speakers don't know they're bad. That's what's so bad. Because the people that need my teaching the most would never sign up for my course. They're like, "Oh, I'm great." I'm like, congregation may not agree.
It's going back to that ego and arrogance you were talking about earlier, Chrissy. And sometimes we think because we communicate all of the time, it's like, but is that, so I love what you said about serving. How are you serving the audience? I want to come back to something that you really drove home, Christy, but I don't want the audience to miss this. And that is the power of storytelling. So just talk about, and I know you're a great storyteller. I love many of your stories, what we're talking about today and over the years. But can you talk about what is it that humans just connect so much with story? And then what is the, when you're figuring out how to put a story at a certain sequence, just what is the importance of that when you're doing a presentation or a talk?
Well, there's fascinating research on story and how our brains work. So, for example, I'll tell you behind me. Let me see if I can find it. One of my favorite speaking books is called Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo. It's not just for speakers, by the way. It's for salespeople, business people, anybody. And he teaches you and unpacks what are some of the most effective techniques of the highest rated TED Talks in history. But he put some interesting research in there in story. So researchers wanted to understand why a story is so effective as a means of communication, because this is across generations, through all of history, across language barriers, different cultures. Story is how we communicate. And it has been since like the caveman. This is from the beginning of time. And even you look at the Bible, Jesus spoke in parables. It's always been stories, right? And so if you understand that story is obviously something that works, these researchers wanted to understand why. And so they hooked up participants. It was a research study with a speaker and an audience. And they hooked up both groups, all people, to MRI machines. And what they found was that as a speaker was telling a story, not only was the audience's brain more engaged, they enjoyed the presentation more, they remembered and retained the information more. And then what's fascinating is as the speaker told a story, the exact same areas of the speaker's brain that lit up at certain parts of the story lit up the participant's brain. So like what I tell people all the time is like, do you understand you can hack into people's brains? Now we want to use this for good, not for evil. This is a deep responsibility we carry, but it is the most effective way to communicate with your audience. And so one of the things I hear often with speakers, so a common problem with speakers is they just have so much to say. So they cram 47 ideas into a 47-minute talk, and then the audience remembers nothing because they can't remember 47 ideas. They can't even really remember 7. Right. So I help people narrow down their content to one main idea that we're going to support through our talk structure. But one of the other things that is a temptation of speakers, and again, it really kind of comes from a place of arrogance of like, I have so much to say, but they think if I'm short on time, cut the fluff. And to them, the fluff is the stories. If I'm short on time, and we're always short on time because we just have so much to say, then just cut the stories. And so what happens is they get in front of the mic, they do a machine gun drill at you, information. And then in my 17th point and my 97th point, and just take notes, write faster. I'm short on time, but I'm going to go a little bit over. And here's the other thing I have to say. And you just feel like like that was not a fun experience for the audience. They were not engaged. They are not going to remember anything you said. And they did not have fun in the process. Whereas you could take one point, and you could spend 45 minutes unpacking this point. And you tell a story that sets up this point, and you highlight a problem that this point is going to solve. And then you unpack the possibilities of the solution of this problem. And then you give some simple action steps on how to apply this solution. And they walk out and they know exactly what you said. For example, I did a little just trial to test my theory on this, which I know it's true, but I just thought I'm just going to practice this. So when I led my course in the fall, Stop Winging It, which by the way, that title is for all the people. They're like, just wing it. I don't need to know. I don't need training. Let's stop winging it. How to face your fear, craft your message, and present like a pro. This is the title of my course. So I'm in the course. I'm leading it live last fall. And I'm teaching them this concept that when you have too many ideas, your audience doesn't remember any. You need one idea that you build out through this whole talk. I learned this, by the way, from Andy Stanley in his book, Communicating for a Change. He taught me this. This is not my idea, but it's brilliant and it works. So I said to my students, probably 100 people on the call that are on live on Zoom, I said, a lot of you have been with me a long time. You've been with me through my business boutique days, through Ramsey days. Like, you're not new to me. I said, what is the number one main point of my fear talk? The chat blew up. Do it scared. Blew up. What's the one thing? Because that's the one thing I say over and over and over. I tell you a story that sets it up of the Fox business. I unpack that fear is normal. You're never going to get over your fear. You've got to learn to do it while you're scared. Here's how you do it. You fake it till you feel it. The antidote to fear is action. The whole thing hinges on my one thesis statement of do it scared. You could do that for my life balance talk. I said, what is the one main thing of my life balance talk? Life balance is living from your values. Or life balance is doing the right things at the right time. Either one of those. I've had 2 versions of it over 12 years of teaching life balance. They know the one thing. Years later, they remember the one thing. And it's fast. So Donald Miller, he interviewed Andy Stanley for a podcast or vice versa. I can't remember. They were on a podcast together. And Donald Miller told a story about being at a college that he had spoken at like 10 years before. And he was talking to a guy and he was like, oh yeah. He's like, I was here years ago for a conference. And the guy goes, oh, I was here for that conference. Do you know who spoke? Andy Stanley. And he said, the number one thing we need to do is da-da-da-da-da. And Donald Miller goes, well, did you remember anyone else that spoke? Because he spoke at that. And the guy goes, no. And so Donald Miller was using this example. And he said, I realized something about you as a communicator, Andy. And he said, you, when you're on stage, you are leading the audience in an exercise in memorization. Let that sit for a second. You're leading the audience in an exercise in memorization. Because if you want people to freaking change their life as a result of your sermon or your talk or your podcast, then they need to know how to change their life. They need to know what you said when they walk away from the room. And so we've got to teach them in a way that takes one idea and lets it build out, lets it breathe, where people enjoy the process and lets it sink in. And the way that you do that, the way that it sticks is through stories that illustrate it, but also just a basic story arc of your talk where you've got a problem, a solution, and an action. So every talk that I help people write follows that very simple structure, which is the story arc, which is how our brains understand information and remember information.
That is gold, Christy. And folks, if you're listening, you are getting literally on air coaching and consulting. So I hope you are taking notes, because as Christy was talking about, Andy Stanley, love a lot of his stuff, especially being here in Atlanta. I've been to his church before, but you're going to remember some things from Christy's conversation today, months from now, years from now. So definitely take notes. Christy, before we get ready to wrap up, you yourself have your own podcast platform. So speaking of all the different communication mediums, you can do talks, and there's video and TV, but podcasts, podcasts, it seems like, Christy, whenever people are like, oh, it's another podcast, it's like podcasts blow up again, and there's just more getting created every day. So what is your podcast, Get Your Hopes Up, about? And just talk about just what God is doing on that show.
Thank you. Yeah. My, a guy on my team back in 2016 came to me and said, I think we should start a podcast, a business boutique podcast. And I was like, okay, sure. Cool. Okay. Like, it was just like, whatever. Like, I didn't have this big strategy or dream. I just kind of went along with his idea. And what's interesting is it just really blew up. It really did well. Like, it connected with people in the tactical teaching. And over time, we kept building that out. It then turned into the Christy Wright Show in 2020, which was more faith and personal development in addition to business, in response to, like, people kept showing up for more than just business. And so we responded to that. And then when I left Ramsey, they had kept the show. It was their show. It was all their stuff. And so they kept all that. And honestly, I had been feeling a little burnout on the podcast. And so I was like, I kind of want to get off the content treadmill of having to maintain this and have guests every week and all the things. And so I had no desire to start a new one. And I was also resting as God told me to. In about 5 or 6 months into me being gone from Ramsey, God just dropped an idea in my heart of a faith-based podcast. And I got excited about it in a new way, a new energy, and it would be different. I just started to dream about it, that it would be shorter, about 20 minutes versus 45 or an hour, just the length of someone on their commute. Excuse me. It would just be me. It wouldn't be all the scheduling and logistics of guests. I may add that in the future, but just out of the gate, I wanted just simple, go in, batch some episodes and so on for my busy life. And I've always been on this kick ever since my devotional Living True came out in 2020. I guess it was 2020 or 2019. There's this story that I share of praying for a daughter after having 2 boys, and it's a pretty vulnerable story, but it was something God taught me about hope. And I was telling myself in church one day, I just don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get my hopes up. I just need to guard my heart. And God spoke to me in that moment, and he said, you never guard your heart with me. I know what to do with every desire I've given you, and I know what to do with every broken piece when you're disappointed. You may guard your heart with others, but you don't guard your heart with me. And get your hopes up. I'm the God of hope. So you get your hopes up. And so that story that I wrote about in my devotional is the heart of this podcast, because it's titled Get Your Hopes Up. And we live in a world, Jason, that tells you don't get your hopes up. It tells you don't get your hopes up. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. It just wants to shoot your faith down. And I actually heard Darius Daniels put something on Instagram recently where he said, the enemy is after your hope. If he can discourage you so much you don't have hope, you have no fuel for your faith, because Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for. So if he can discourage you so much you don't hope, you don't have faith. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. And so, like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, the enemy is after our hope and our faith. And so I just want to create a podcast that hits that head on and says, and I even had to fight for that title, because I got some opposition through the years of like, oh, we can't say that. I was like, yeah, we can. I'm an Enneagram 8. Yeah, we can. Get your freaking hopes up. Romans 15:13 says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace, so that you may trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope. These are God's words, not mine. Take it up with him. We're going to get our hopes up. So I get in there, I get bossy, I get excited, and I just help people get their hopes up.
I love that. And even, Christy, the other scripture, in the absence of hope deferred actually makes the heart sick. Yes. So, yes, we should get our hopes
That's right.
in Christ. I love that, Christy. Christy, you have added so much value today. I'm telling you, listeners, you're going to want to go back and listen to this and share it. By now, Christy, people are, I'm sure, saying to themselves, how can I get in touch with Christy, where can I find her? So how can the listeners connect with you, Christy?
Oh, thank you. Well, if you go to ChristyWright.com, that's all the things I'm up to. You can go to GetYourHopesUp.com. It takes you the same place, but the podcast is there. If you need help with discouragement, I've got an email series to help you get more encouraged. And then if you want to find out anything about speaker training, that's all there as well, from the course to the coaching to a free mini book, Top 10 Mistakes All Speakers Make and How to Avoid Them. So there's a bunch of resources, free, and courses and things coming up. So you can check out all that at ChristyWright.com.
Love that. And folks, don't fear. We will have all of Christy's information in the show notes at fortifiedlifepodcast.com. So don't worry if you miss something. That's the beauty of technology and listening on demand. You can go back and rewind and feel free to go to the site for the show notes. Well, Christy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know I was blessed. I know the audience was blessed, and we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. You're awesome, Jason. Thank you for being a light in this space and inviting me to come on with you. So Scott, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's all we have time for today. Remember, God is with you from the boardroom to the bathroom. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fortified Life podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out fortifiedlifepodcast.com for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortified, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business. Available on Amazon.
Wendy's 2 for $6 lets you mix and match some of our best items, like Dave Single with a 10-piece crispy nugs, medium strawberry lemonade with a spicy chicken sandwich, spicy chicken with a Dave Single with a strawberry lemonade, strawberry lemonade, if you're into that. Chicken Sam, crispy nugs, strawberry lemonade, Dave's, nugs, Sam. Whew. Pick what you want at a price you want. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's 2 for $6.
For a limited time, price and participation may vary at U.S. Wendy's. On the card only. Single item at regular price.
Progressive presents Adjusting to the Suburbs.
I never thought about space in my cramped apartment, but in this house, all I see is empty space. The sofa and ottoman look like tiny islands in a sea of hardwood floors. I could get 2 ottomans in the living room, but then I'd need another sofa. I could tell people I'm into minimalism.
Anyway, when you save with Progressive by bundling your home and auto, that's the easy part of adjusting to the suburbs. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided in service by affiliates and third-party insurers.